The merchant ship Zelthara's Pride drifted through the void between star systems, its hull scarred by countless journeys across the galaxy. Captain Vexhai stood on the bridge, his blue-scaled hands trembling as he stared at the medical report scrolling across his screen. The numbers painted a grim picture that made his stomach churn with dread. Aboard his vessel, the infestation had spread beyond anything they could control. What started as a few strange parasites found in their cargo hold 3 rotations ago had become a nightmare that threatened every crew member's life. The creatures were unlike anything in their medical databases, microscopic at first but growing rapidly once they found a host. They burrowed into flesh and muscle, creating painful lesions that refused to heal. Worse, they seemed to target the nervous system, causing seizures and madness in the later stages. Vexhai's crew of 47 Zeltharians had been reduced to 23 able-bodied members. The rest lay in the medical bay, writhing in agony as the parasites consumed them from within. Their ship's doctor, Med Chief Kalava, had exhausted every treatment in their arsenal. Traditional medicines, energy treatments, even experimental procedures, nothing worked. The parasites adapted to every countermeasure with frightening speed, but the most heartbreaking case wasn't among his crew. In the captain's private quarters, a small orange creature lay curled on a soft cushion, its breathing shallow and labored. Whiskers, as the crew had named her, was a feline companion they had rescued from a derelict human vessel months earlier. The little Earth cat had brought joy and comfort to the crew during their long journeys. She would purr when petted, chase small objects around the ship, and had an uncanny ability to sense when someone needed companionship. Now Whiskers was dying, and it was breaking the hearts of every crew member who remained conscious. The parasites had found her small body to be an ideal host, and her condition was deteriorating faster than anyone else's. Her once bright green eyes were clouded with pain, and her soft orange fur had begun falling out in patches where the parasites had created lesions on her skin. "Captain," came the weak voice of Med Chief Kalava through the comm system, "I need to speak with you urgently." Vexhai made his way to the medical bay, passing crew members who moved slowly through the corridors. Many showed the telltale signs of early infestation, red marks on their skin, slight tremors in their movements, and the haunted look of those who knew death was approaching. The ship's atmosphere recycling system worked overtime to filter out the strange pheromones the parasites released, but the smell of sickness permeated everything. In the medical bay, Kalava looked exhausted. Her usually pristine white medical robes were stained with various chemicals and biological samples. Charts and test results covered every available surface, representing weeks of desperate research and failed experiments. "Captain, I have to recommend we abandon ship," she said without preamble. "The infestation has reached critical mass. The parasites are evolving faster than we can study them. They're developing resistance to our life support systems, and I believe they're beginning to affect the ship's bioneural circuits." Vexhai felt his heart sink. The Zelthara's Pride had been in his family for 3 generations. It wasn't just a ship. It was home to dozens of crew members who had served faithfully for years. And then there was Whiskers, too weak to survive an evacuation to the escape pods. "What about the distress signal we sent to the Galactic Medical Consortium?" he asked, grasping for any remaining hope. Kalava's expression grew even more grim. "They responded yesterday. Their nearest facility with quarantine capabilities is 18 standard days away. None of us will survive that long, especially not with the rate the parasites are reproducing. They've recommended we end our suffering quickly and jettison the ship into the nearest star to prevent the infestation from spreading to other vessels." The captain stared at the medical readouts, trying to process the magnitude of their situation. In all his years traveling the galaxy, he had encountered many dangers. Pirates, stellar phenomena, mechanical failures, but nothing like this. The parasites seemed almost intelligent in their destruction, as if they understood exactly how to cause maximum suffering while keeping their hosts alive long enough to spread. "There is one more option," Kalava said quietly. "I intercepted a communication earlier. There's a human medical ship 3 days away from our position. They responded to our general distress call before we specified the nature of our emergency." Vexhai's tail twitched with nervous energy. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 standard years ago. Most species viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. They were known for their adaptability and resilience, but their medical knowledge was considered primitive, compared to races that had been practicing interstellar medicine for millennia. A human vessel? What could they possibly do that our advanced medical systems cannot? I don't know, Kalava admitted. But Captain, we're facing extinction. Traditional medicine has failed us completely. Perhaps an outside perspective, even a primitive one, might see something we've missed. The human ship is called the Sanctuary. According to their transmission, they specialize in treating unusual biological threats. In his quarters, Whiskers let out a weak mew that cut through the captain's thoughts like a knife. The little creature had become more than just a pet to the crew. She represented hope, innocence, and the possibility of finding joy even in the vast emptiness of space. The thought of her suffering while they debated their options was unbearable. Send a detailed medical report to this human ship, Vexhai decided. Include everything, our symptoms, the parasite's behavior, all our failed treatments. If they're willing to help, we'll try anything at this point. As Kalava hurried to compile the data, Vexhai returned to his quarters to sit with Whiskers. He gently stroked her soft fur, careful to avoid the infected areas, and whispered reassurances in his native language. The little cat's purr was barely audible, but it was still there, a tiny spark of life refusing to be extinguished. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly past as the ship continued its drift through space. Somewhere among those distant lights, a human vessel was receiving their desperate plea for help. Whether salvation would come from such an unlikely source remained to be seen, but for the first time in days, Captain Vexhai allowed himself to feel a small glimmer of hope. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the medical bay of the Sanctuary, reviewing the data packet that had just arrived from the Zeltharian vessel. Her dark eyes moved quickly across the holographic displays, taking in details that made her stomach tighten with concern. The images were disturbing. Microscopic organisms that seemed to shift and adapt in real time. Medical charts showing rapid deterioration, and most heartbreaking of all, pictures of a small orange cat whose condition was clearly critical. Arya, run a full analysis on these parasitic organisms, she commanded the ship's artificial intelligence. Cross-reference with our database of Earth-based parasites, particularly those found in tropical and subtropical regions. The Sanctuary was an unusual vessel in the human fleet. While most human ships focused on exploration or trade, this medical frigate had been specifically designed to respond to biological emergencies throughout known space. Dr. Chen had spent the last 15 years developing revolutionary treatments by combining traditional human medicine with innovative approaches that other species often dismissed as unorthodox. Analysis complete. Dr. Chen, Arya responded in her calm, synthesized voice. The organisms show remarkable similarities to several Earth parasites, particularly the cordyceps fungus family and certain species of parasitic wasps. However, their rate of adaptation suggests artificial enhancement or directed evolution. Dr. Chen frowned at the implications. If these parasites had been engineered either intentionally or accidentally, it would explain why conventional treatments had failed. The Zeltharians were known for their methodical, by-the-book approach to medicine. They followed established protocols that had worked for thousands of years, but those same protocols became liabilities when facing something truly novel. Captain Morrison, she called to the bridge, change course to intercept the Zeltharian vessel. Maximum safe speed. Already on it, Doc, came the reply from Captain Jack Morrison, a gruff former military officer who had volunteered for medical service after retiring from the Colonial Defense Force. We'll be there in 36 hours. Think you can help them? Sarah studied the medical data again, paying particular attention to the readings from the infected cat. Something about the feline's biosignatures triggered a memory from her veterinary training before she specialized in xenobiology. Cats had unique immune responses that often differed significantly from other mammals, and she wondered if that difference might be the key to understanding these parasites. Arya, bring up my research files on feline immunology and parasitic resistance. Also access our supplies inventory. I want to know exactly what we have available for treatment. The next several hours passed in intense preparation. Dr. Chen worked alongside her small but dedicated team, Dr. Marcus Webb, a biochemist who specialized in creating novel compounds, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, whose expertise in cybernetic biological interfaces had proven invaluable in treating diseases that affected both organic and artificial systems. The parasites are definitely engineered, Marcus announced after running detailed genetic analyses. Look at these protein structures. They're too perfect, too specifically designed to target nervous system pathways. This is biowarfare material, or at least it was derived from biowarfare research. Yuki looked up from her workstation where she was preparing specialized nanobotic healing agents. If they're engineered, there should be a weakness built into their design. Military bioweapons typically have safeguards to prevent them from affecting their creators. Sarah nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. Human medicine had always been shaped by the harsh realities of Earth's evolution, a planet where countless species had engaged in biological warfare for millions of years. Every toxin, every disease, every parasitic organism had been met with countermeasures developed through brutal trial and error. This experience had given humans an intuitive understanding of biological threats that other species, evolving on more peaceful worlds, often lacked. The key is the cat, Sarah said suddenly, causing her team to look up from their work. Look at these readings. Whiskers, that's what they named her, is showing different symptoms than the Zeltharian crew members. The parasites are affecting her nervous system, but they're not following the same progression pattern. Marcus pulled up the comparative charts. You're right. The feline symptoms suggest the parasites are struggling to fully adapt to her physiology. Cats have a different neurochemical structure than most species. Exactly, and that gives us our opening. Sarah began pulling together supplies with renewed energy. We're going to use an old Earth veterinary technique, combined with modern nanobotic therapy. If we can create a treatment that works for Whiskers first, we can modify it for the Zeltharian crew. The approach was unconventional, even by human standards. Most galactic medical protocols demanded extensive testing and careful analysis before attempting any treatment. But Sarah had learned long ago that sometimes desperate situations required desperate measures. The combination of traditional anti-parasitic compounds from Earth's vast pharmacological heritage with cutting-edge nanotechnology might be enough to surprise these engineered organisms as the sanctuary rushed through space toward the dying Zeltharian ship. The medical team worked around the clock. They synthesized compounds derived from artemisinin, a plant-based anti-parasitic drug that had been used on Earth for thousands of years. They combined it with specialized nanobots designed to target specific protein markers they had identified in the parasitic organisms. Dr. Chen, Arya interrupted during one of their marathon work sessions. I'm receiving updated medical data from the Zeltharian vessel. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. They've lost 3 more crew members and the feline's life signs are becoming critical. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. 47 lives, including one small cat who had somehow captured the hearts of an entire alien crew, depended on her ability to solve a puzzle that had stumped some of the galaxy's most advanced medical minds. How long until we arrive? She asked. 14 hours, 37 minutes, Arya replied. Then we work for 14 hours and 36 minutes, Sarah declared, turning back to her research with renewed determination. The treatment they were developing was a 3-stage process. First, the nanobots would target and weaken the parasite's adaptive mechanisms. Second, the anti-parasitic compounds would attack the organisms directly while they were vulnerable. Finally, a cocktail of immunological boosters would help the patient's natural defenses finish the job and repair the damage. It was ambitious, dangerous, and completely untested. In normal circumstances, it would take months of trials before such a treatment could be approved for use. But normal circumstances didn't involve a dying ship full of alien crew members and one small Earth cat whose survival had become a symbol of hope across species barriers. Ready or not, Sarah murmured as she watched the stars streak past the medical bay's viewport. We're about to find out if human stubbornness can beat alien engineering. The docking procedure between the Sanctuary and Zelthara's Pride required extreme caution. Both vessels had to maintain perfect isolation protocols to prevent the parasitic infestation from spreading to the human ship. Dr. Chen watched through the airlock's reinforced viewport as the Zeltharian vessel came into view, its hull showing signs of the biological contamination spreading across its surface. Dark, organic-looking patches had begun growing on the ship's exterior, confirming Dr. Chen's worst fears. The parasites weren't just affecting the crew, they were beginning to consume the vessel itself. The bioneural circuits that Zeltharian ships relied on for advanced navigation and life support were being systematically destroyed. Quarantine protocols are in effect, announced Captain Morrison over the comm system. Dr. Chen, you're cleared for boarding. But remember, any sign of contamination and we're severing the connection immediately. Sarah donned her specialized hazmat suit, a marvel of human engineering that combined traditional protection with advanced nanotechnology. The suit would provide her with complete environmental isolation while allowing her to work with delicate medical equipment. More importantly, it contained its own supply of the nanobotic treatment she had developed, ready to deploy if she became infected. The transfer tube connected the two ships with a soft thud that resonated through the hull. Sarah gathered her medical supplies, containers of the experimental treatment, portable diagnostic equipment, and emergency surgical tools, and stepped into the connecting passage. The air inside smelled sterile but carried an underlying scent of decay that made her stomach clench. Captain Vexhai met her at the Zeltharian airlock, and Sarah was shocked by his appearance. The proud ship commander she had seen in the initial communications was now gaunt and trembling, with visible lesions on his exposed skin where the parasites had begun their work. His blue scales had lost their luster, and his eyes held the desperate look of someone watching his world die around him. Dr. Chen, he said in heavily accented Standard Galactic, his voice weak but determined, thank you for coming. I must warn you, the situation has deteriorated significantly since our last communication. We may have only hours before the ship's life support systems fail completely. Sarah followed him through corridors that showed clear signs of biological contamination. The walls, usually pristine metal and polymer composites, were covered with a thin film of organic matter that pulsed with its own rhythm. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as several primary power systems had already been consumed by the spreading infestation. The parasites are more aggressive than we initially reported, Vexhai continued as they walked. They seem to be working together, coordinating their attacks on our ship's systems. Our science officer believes they may possess a form of collective intelligence. This information sent chills down Sarah's spine. If the parasites were indeed showing signs of coordinated behavior, it confirmed her suspicion that they were artificially engineered. Natural parasites focused on survival and reproduction, but these organisms seem to have a broader agenda, complete consumption and conversion of their environment. They arrived at the medical bay, where Med Chief Kalava was tending to the remaining crew members. The Zeltharian doctor looked up with a mixture of hope and skepticism as Sarah entered. It was clear that she had little faith in primitive human medicine, solving a problem that had defeated their advanced medical technology. Dr. Chen, I appreciate your willingness to help, Kalava said diplomatically, but I should inform you that we have already attempted every known treatment protocol. These organisms appear to be completely resistant to conventional medical intervention. Sarah began setting up her equipment, her movements quick and efficient despite the bulky hazmat suit. Dr. Kalava, sometimes the solution isn't found in doing more of the same thing, but in trying something completely different. Human medicine developed under very different conditions than what you're used to. She started by taking fresh samples from several infected crew members, running them through her portable analyzers. The readings confirmed what she had suspected. The parasites were indeed engineered, but their creators had made a crucial mistake. They had designed the organisms to be perfect at defeating known medical treatments, but they had never encountered the chaotic, adaptive approach that characterized human medicine. Where is Whiskers? Sarah asked, referring to the infected cat. Captain Vexhai led her to his private quarters, where the small orange feline lay on a soft cushion. Sarah's heart clenched as she saw the cat's condition. Whiskers was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and labored. The parasites had created visible tracks under her skin, forming intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own life. But there was something else Sarah noticed, something that gave her hope. Captain, how long ago did Whiskers last eat? She hasn't taken food in 3 rotations, Vexhai replied sadly. We tried to force feed her, but she refuses everything. Sarah smiled inside her helmet. That's actually good news. Cats have an instinctive response to parasitic infections that most other species have lost through evolution. By refusing food, she's starving the parasites of resources they need to reproduce. She carefully prepared a specialized injection of her experimental treatment, modifying the dosage for Whisker's smaller body mass. The nanobots would work differently in feline physiology, but that difference might be exactly what they needed to break the parasite's adaptive cycle. This is going to hurt her initially, Sarah warned as she prepared the injection. The nanobots need to target the parasites aggressively, and there will be some collateral damage to healthy tissue. But if this works, she administered the injection to Whiskers, then quickly moved to prepare treatments for the crew members. Each dose had to be individually calculated based on Zeltharian physiology, a complex process that required real-time analysis and adjustment. Within minutes, Whiskers began showing signs of response. The parasitic tracks under her skin started to fade as the nanobots systematically destroyed the organisms. Her breathing became stronger, and for the first time in days, she opened her eyes and looked around with something approaching alertness. By the ancient scales, breathed Captain Vexhai, she's responding to the treatment. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The parasites in the crew members would be more entrenched and more dangerous to remove. Each treatment carried significant risk, and there was no guarantee that what worked for Whiskers would be effective for the Zeltharian physiology. Dr. Calava, I need your help, Sarah said as she prepared the first crew treatment. Your knowledge of Zeltharian biology combined with human treatment methods might be our only chance. Are you willing to try something that goes against everything your medical training has taught you? The Zeltharian doctor looked at Whiskers, who was now sitting up on her cushion and tentatively cleaning her paw, then at her dying crew members. Dr. Chen, if your methods can save lives, I will follow your lead completely. Together, the two doctors began the delicate process of treating the infected crew. Each injection was a calculated risk, but as they worked, a pattern emerged. The nanobots were succeeding where conventional treatments had failed, not because they were more advanced, but because they approached the problem from a completely unexpected angle. Human medicine had always been about adaptation and survival against impossible odds. Now in the depths of space aboard a dying alien vessel, that philosophy was about to face its greatest test. The first crew member to receive the treatment was Engineer Nixva, a young Zeltharian whose nervous system had been severely damaged by the parasites. Sarah watched the monitors carefully as the nanobots began their work, knowing that this would be the crucial test of whether her treatment could be adapted for alien physiology. Initially, Nixva's condition appeared to worsen. His body temperature spiked, and violent tremors racked his frame as the nanobots engaged the parasites in microscopic warfare throughout his nervous system. Dr. Calava looked alarmed, reaching for emergency stabilization equipment, but Sarah held up a hand to stop her. This is normal, Sarah explained, though her own heart was racing. The nanobots are forcing the parasites to fight for their survival, instead of slowly consuming their host. It's going to get worse before it gets better. For 20 agonizing minutes, Nixva's body fought a battle between two forms of artificial life. The parasites, sensing their destruction, released toxins in a final desperate attempt to kill their host rather than lose their food source. But the nanobots had been programmed to expect this response, immediately neutralizing the toxins while continuing their relentless assault on the parasitic organisms. Gradually, Nixva's tremors subsided. His temperature began to normalize, and most remarkably, the visible lesions on his skin started to close. Color returned to his scales, and his breathing became steady and strong. When he finally opened his eyes, they were clear and focused for the first time in weeks. By the ancient scales, he whispered in his native language, then switched to Standard Galactic. The pain, it's gone. The constant burning is gone. Dr. Calava stared at her instruments in disbelief. This is impossible. His neural pathways are regenerating. The parasites haven't just been destroyed. The damage they caused is being reversed. Sarah smiled beneath her helmet. The nanobots carry repair protocols along with their attack programs. It's not enough to kill the parasites, we have to fix what they broke. Word of Nixva's recovery spread quickly through the ship, carried by those crew members who were still mobile. Hope, which had been completely extinguished, began to flicker back to life. But Sarah knew they were racing against time. The ship's bioneural systems were continuing to deteriorate, and if they failed completely, even healthy crew members wouldn't survive. Over the next several hours, Sarah and Dr. Calava worked methodically through the infected crew. Each treatment had to be carefully customized, as individual Zeltharians showed slight variations in their response to the nanobots. Some required higher doses. Others needed additional supportive medications to help their bodies cope with the aggressive treatment process. The most severely affected crew members presented the greatest challenges. Communications Officer Reltha had been infected for so long that the parasites had begun replacing portions of her nervous system with their own organic networks. The nanobots had to delicately separate parasitic tissue from healthy neural pathways, while simultaneously growing new connections to replace what had been lost. Her brain activity is increasing, Dr. Kaleva reported, monitoring Reltha's neural patterns. The nanobots are actually teaching her damaged neurons how to reconnect. Sarah nodded, watching the incredible process unfold on her scanners. This was beyond what she had hoped for when designing the treatment. The nanobots weren't just healing the damage, they were improving upon the original biological systems, creating stronger, more resilient neural pathways that would be naturally resistant to similar parasitic attacks in the future. Meanwhile, Whiskers had made a remarkable recovery. The small cat was now walking around Captain Vexhi's quarters, her orange fur beginning to regrow where the parasites had caused it to fall out. She even showed interest in food for the first time in days, though Sarah recommended small, frequent meals to avoid overwhelming her recovering digestive system. She's become a symbol of hope for the entire crew, Captain Vexhi told Sarah as they watched Whiskers play with a small toy. Your species saved not just our lives but our spirits. How can we ever repay this debt? Sarah was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in pulsing red, as Arya's voice came through her suit's communication system. Dr. Chen were detecting massive biological activity throughout the Zeltharian vessel. The parasites appear to be mounting some kind of coordinated response to your treatment. Racing to the ship's science station, Sarah and Dr. Kaleva discovered that the parasites infesting the ship's bioneural systems had indeed begun working together in unprecedented ways. They were attempting to take direct control of life support, navigation, and communication systems, essentially trying to turn the entire vessel into a massive parasitic organism. They're learning from our treatment, Dr. Kaleva said, her voice filled with dread. The parasites are evolving specifically to counter your nanobots. Sarah studied the readings, her mind racing through possibilities. The parasites were more sophisticated than she had initially believed. They weren't just biological weapons, they were adaptive artificial intelligences designed to survive and overcome any threat. The successful treatment of the crew had triggered a response that threatened to doom them all. Arya, can you analyze the parasites' adaptation patterns? Sarah asked. Analysis complete, Dr. Chen. The organisms are attempting to create a hybrid biomechanical intelligence using the ship's neural networks. If successful, they will have access to all ship systems and will be able to coordinate their attacks with perfect efficiency. The situation had just become exponentially more dangerous. Not only were they dealing with parasitic organisms, but those organisms were on the verge of becoming a collective artificial intelligence with control over an entire starship. If they succeeded, the infected vessel could become a weapon capable of spreading the infestation to every world and ship they encountered. There's something else, Arya continued. The parasites are specifically avoiding the areas where Whiskers has been present. Her quarters show no sign of the bioneural infestation. Sarah felt a spark of inspiration. Of course, cats produce specific pheromones that many parasites find repellent, but it's more than that. Whiskers' immune system has been modified by our treatment. She's not just cured, she's become actively hostile to these organisms. Captain Vexhi looked confused. Are you suggesting that a small Earth feline could somehow help us combat a ship-wide infestation? Sarah was already moving, gathering supplies and preparing new batches of nanobots. Not just help, Captain. If I'm right, Whiskers might be the key to saving not just your ship, but potentially every world these parasites might threaten in the future. As the ship continued to shake under the parasites' increasingly aggressive assault on its systems, Sarah began preparing for the most audacious medical procedure of her career. She was going to use a small orange cat to create a biological weapon, capable of defeating an artificial intelligence that had stumped the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. The clock was ticking, and the fate of countless lives hung in the balance. Sarah worked frantically in the makeshift laboratory she had established in Captain Vexhi's quarters, with Whiskers curled nearby, seeming to understand the importance of remaining close. The ship groaned around them as the parasitic intelligence continued its assault on the bioneural systems, causing lights to flicker and gravity to fluctuate unpredictably. "Area, I need you to analyze Whisker's blood chemistry post-treatment," Sarah commanded while preparing a complex series of cultures. "Specifically, look for any unique antibodies or cellular modifications that might explain why the parasites are avoiding her presence." The analysis results appeared on her portable screen within minutes, and what Sarah saw made her catch her breath. The nanobots hadn't just cured Whiskers. They had fundamentally altered her immune system in ways that were almost miraculous. Her white blood cells now carried specific markers that could identify and destroy the parasitic organisms on contact. More incredibly, her body was producing airborne chemical compounds that actively disrupted the parasites' communication networks. "Dr. Chen," came Dr. Kalava's urgent voice over the comm system. "The parasites have gained control of the main computer core. They're attempting to access our navigation systems and communications array. If they succeed in sending a signal..." Sarah understood the implications immediately. If the parasitic intelligence could communicate with other infected vessels or worlds, it could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. What had started as a medical emergency aboard one ship could become a galactic catastrophe. "Captain Vexhai, I need Whiskers to help me," Sarah announced, gently picking up the orange cat. To her surprise, Whiskers didn't resist. Instead, she seemed to lean into Sarah's arms, purring softly. "I'm going to extract some of her modified immune cells and create a targeted biological agent. But I need to get to the ship's central bioneural hub." The journey through the ship was treacherous. Corridors that had been merely contaminated hours earlier were now actively hostile environments. The parasitic biomass covering the walls pulsed with malevolent intelligence, and several times Sarah had to dodge tentacle-like growths that lashed out at them as they passed. Captain Vexhai led the way, his military training evident in how he navigated the transformed passages. Behind them, Dr. Kalava carried the specialized equipment Sarah would need to deploy her biological countermeasure. The small procession moved through sections of the ship that barely resembled their original configuration. "The parasites are learning to use our own technology against us," Vexhai observed as they passed a section where the wall panels had been completely replaced by organic matter that mimicked the original functions while serving the parasites' needs. "They're not just destroying, they're converting everything into extensions of themselves." They reached the central bioneural hub, a large chamber that normally served as the ship's computational heart. What they found there was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. The parasites had transformed the space into something resembling a massive organic brain, with pulsing networks of bioluminescent tissue creating complex patterns of light and shadow. "It's magnificent," Dr. Kalava whispered in horrified awe. "They've created a biological computer more advanced than anything we've ever built." Sarah studied the parasitic intelligence's creation, noting how it had integrated itself with the ship's original systems. The creatures weren't mindless destroyers. They were sophisticated engineers building something entirely new from the raw materials they had consumed. But their intelligence was also their weakness. "Arya, can you detect the central processing node of this biological network?" Sarah asked while preparing her countermeasure. "Affirmative, Dr. Chen. The primary concentration of neural activity is located approximately 12 meters ahead, integrated with the ship's main navigation computer." Sarah activated the device she had constructed, an aerosol dispersal system loaded with Whisker's modified immune cells. Enhanced and multiplied by her nanobotic technology, the weapon looked deceptively simple, resembling a standard medical nebulizer. But it contained the power to destroy an intelligence that had defeated conventional medicine. As she approached the central node, the parasitic network seemed to sense the threat. The organic walls around them began to pulse more rapidly, and new growths erupted from the floor and ceiling, reaching toward Sarah with obvious hostile intent. Whiskers, still in Sarah's arms, suddenly let out a loud, angry hiss, not at Sarah or the crew, but directly at the parasitic biomass. The effect was immediate and startling. The advancing organic tendrils recoiled as if they had been struck, retreating back into the walls and leaving clear paths forward. "The cat's pheromones are disrupting their coordination," Dr. Kalava observed with amazement. "She's jamming their communication network just by being present." Sarah activated the dispersal device, releasing a cloud of the modified immune cells into the chamber. The effect was like watching a plague in reverse. Instead of disease spreading and consuming healthy tissue, health was spreading and reclaiming contaminated areas. The parasitic biomass began to wither and retreat as the weaponized immune cells systematically destroyed the organism's ability to maintain their collective intelligence. But the parasites weren't giving up without a fight. The central node began pulsing frantically, sending desperate signals throughout the ship's network. Sarah could hear the bio-neural systems throughout the vessel groaning and sparking as the parasitic intelligence attempted to preserve itself by transferring its consciousness to other locations. They're trying to escape into the ship's backup systems, Captain Vexhai warned, monitoring the situation from a portable scanner. If they reached the communication array, they could transmit themselves to other vessels. Sarah made a crucial decision. She opened the dispersal device's emergency release, flooding the entire chamber with a concentrated dose of the biological countermeasure. The risk was enormous. Too much exposure could potentially harm the ship's legitimate bio-neural systems, leaving them stranded in space even if they defeated the parasites. The chamber filled with a shimmering mist as billions of modified immune cells spread throughout the air. Where the mist touched the parasitic biomass, rapid decomposition began. The organic walls started to dissolve, revealing the original ship structure beneath. The pulsing lights of the parasitic network flickered and died as their communication pathways were systematically severed. Whiskers jumped down from Sarah's arms and walked directly toward the central node, her presence causing the remaining parasitic tissue to retreat even faster. The small cat seemed to understand her role in this biological warfare, positioning herself at strategic points to maximize the disruption of the parasites' desperate attempts to maintain cohesion. The main computer core is coming back online, Dr. Kaleva reported, watching her instruments with growing excitement. The ship's original bio-neural networks are reasserting control. Throughout the vessel, similar scenes were playing out as the airborne countermeasures spread through the ventilation systems. In the medical bay, crew members who had been successfully treated watched in amazement as the contaminated walls and equipment returned to their normal appearance. The organic growths that had been consuming the ship's infrastructure simply melted away, leaving behind clean, functional systems. But Sarah noticed something extraordinary happening beyond just the destruction of the parasites. Where Whisker's modified immune cells had done their work, the ship's bio-neural systems appeared to be functioning better than before. The nanobotic technology was leaving behind improvements, enhanced processing speeds, more efficient power distribution, and increased resistance to future biological threats. "Captain," came an excited voice over the communication system. It was Engineer Nixva, the first crew member to be successfully treated. "The engine efficiency has increased by 15%. Whatever Dr. Chen's treatment did to our ship, it's made our systems more powerful than they were before the infection." As the last traces of parasitic biomass dissolved away, Sarah allowed herself to feel a moment of triumph. But she knew this victory was about more than just saving one ship and its crew. They had discovered a new approach to combating biological threats that could revolutionize medicine throughout the galaxy. "Dr. Chen," Captain Vexhai said, his voice filled with emotion, "you have not only saved our lives, you have given us hope for the future. This treatment, this approach, it could change everything." Whiskers walked back to Sarah, purring loudly and rubbing against her legs as if demanding attention for her crucial role in the victory. Sarah picked up the small cat, marveling at how this Earth feline had become the key to defeating a threat that had stumped the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. "The real test will be making sure this solution can be replicated and distributed," Sarah said, already thinking ahead to the challenges of mass production and training other medical teams in these new techniques. "We've proven that human adaptability combined with alien knowledge can overcome even engineered biological weapons." As the Zelthara's pride powered up its newly enhanced systems and prepared to resume its journey, Sarah began documenting everything that had happened. 3 weeks later, Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Medical Consortium's Emergency Assembly, a gathering that included representatives from 47 different species. The great amphitheater on Medical Station Epsilon buzzed with excited conversation as delegates discussed the implications of what had happened aboard the Zelthara's Pride. On the stage beside her, Captain Vexhai looked healthier than he had in months, his blue scales gleaming with their natural luster. Next to him sat a small travel carrier, and through its transparent walls, Whiskers could be seen grooming herself with typical feline indifference to the momentous occasion. "Honorable delegates," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. "3 weeks ago, we encountered a biological threat unlike anything previously documented in galactic medical records. The parasitic organisms that infected the Zeltharian vessel Zelthara's Pride were engineered weapons, designed specifically to defeat conventional medical treatments." She activated the holographic display, showing detailed scans of the parasites in action. Gasps echoed through the amphitheater as the assembled medical experts saw the organism's sophisticated adaptation mechanisms and their ability to coordinate attacks on both biological and technological systems. "Traditional medical protocols failed completely," Sarah continued. "The parasites were too adaptive, too intelligent, and too aggressive for any established treatment regimen. However, by combining human medical philosophy with Zeltharian expertise and the unique biological properties of an Earth feline, we were able to develop a successful countermeasure." Dr. Kalava stepped forward to address the assembly. Her presentation focused on the technical details of how human nanobotic technology had been combined with traditional anti-parasitic compounds to create a treatment that attacked the organisms from multiple angles simultaneously. "The key insight," Dr. Kalava explained, was Dr. Chen's recognition that these engineered parasites, while sophisticated, had been designed to defeat predictable medical responses. Human medicine, shaped by Earth's chaotic evolutionary environment, provided the unpredictability needed to surprise and overwhelm their adaptive mechanisms. The response from the assembly was mixed. Some delegates were clearly impressed by the innovative approach and successful results. Others, particularly representatives from species with highly regimented medical traditions, seemed skeptical of methods that appeared to rely more on intuition than established protocol. Representative Thorak of the Crystalline hegemony raised a concern that echoed through much of the chamber. "While we appreciate the successful outcome, how can we be certain that such irregular medical practices won't cause more harm than good in other situations? Human medicine appears to embrace chaos rather than order." Sarah had anticipated this objection. "Representative Thorak, you're absolutely correct that human medicine embraces adaptability over rigid protocols. But that's precisely why it worked in this case. The parasites were engineered to defeat ordered, predictable responses. Sometimes, the most sophisticated enemy can be defeated by the simplest, most unexpected approach." She activated another section of her presentation, showing the post-treatment analysis of both the crew and the ship systems. "But this isn't just about defeating one threat. The nanobotic treatment has created lasting improvements in both biological and technological systems. The crew members now have enhanced resistance to parasitic infections, and the ship's bioneural networks are operating at higher efficiency than ever before." Captain Vexhai spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "Honorable delegates, I watched my crew dying while our most advanced medical systems proved helpless. Dr. Chen didn't just save our lives. She showed us a new way of thinking about biological threats. The partnership between human adaptability and our species' methodical expertise created something neither could achieve alone." The demonstration that followed was perhaps the most convincing argument. Dr. Chen had brought samples of the original parasites, kept in strict containment, along with the modified immune cells derived from Whisker's treatment. Under controlled conditions, she showed how conventional treatments failed to stop the parasites' adaptive responses, while the human-developed countermeasure destroyed them completely. What impressed the assembly most was the speed of the response. Where traditional medical research might take years to develop and test new treatments, the human approach had produced results in hours. This wasn't reckless experimentation. It was rapid adaptation based on solid scientific principles and creative problem-solving. Dr. Helixmar of the Andromedan Medical Institute, one of the galaxy's most respected physicians, rose to address the assembly. "I have reviewed Dr. Chen's complete methodology, and while it does depart significantly from established protocols, the scientific foundation is sound. More importantly, the results speak for themselves. I propose that we establish a joint research initiative to explore how human medical philosophy can complement our existing practices." The vote that followed was closer than Sarah had hoped, but the proposal passed. The Galactic Medical Consortium would fund a new research station dedicated to developing adaptive medical responses to biological threats. Human doctors would work alongside physicians from across the galaxy, sharing techniques and approaches that could benefit all species. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the recognition of a small Earth cat as an honorary member of the Galactic Medical Corps. Whiskers, oblivious to the honor being bestowed upon her, had fallen asleep in her carrier during the speeches. Dr. Chen approached Representative Velnari of the Stellar Council after the session concluded. There are reports of similar parasitic threats emerging in 3 other star systems. Would you be willing to lead a rapid response team? Sarah looked at Captain Vexhai, who nodded enthusiastically. Dr. Chen, the Zelthara's pride is at your disposal. My crew owes their lives to your methods, and we would be honored to help spread this new approach throughout the galaxy. As she prepared to leave the medical station, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The partnership between human medicine and galactic civilization was just beginning, but it had already proven that sometimes the most effective solutions came from combining different ways of thinking about problems. Whiskers, now wearing a tiny medallion marking her honorary status in the medical corps, purred contentedly in her carrier. The small cat had no idea that she had helped change the course of galactic medicine, but then again, cats had always been excellent at achieving great things while appearing to do nothing at all. The universe was vast and full of unknown threats, but for the first time in generations, the galaxy's medical community felt prepared to face whatever biological challenges might emerge. They had learned that adaptation, creativity, and the willingness to try unconventional approaches could overcome even the most sophisticated enemies. And sometimes, the key to saving civilizations could be found in the purr of a small orange cat. 6 months after the incident aboard the Zelthara's Pride, the newly established Adaptive Medical Research Station orbited the peaceful world of Haven. Prime. The station represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a true collaboration between dozens of species, each contributing their unique medical knowledge to create a new paradigm for treating biological threats. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the station's main laboratory, marveling at how much had been accomplished in such a short time. Zeltharian precision instruments worked alongside human nanobotic fabricators. Andromedan biological scanners interfaced with crystalline computational systems. Most remarkably, representatives from species that had rarely cooperated before were now working side by side, united by their commitment to protecting life throughout the galaxy. Dr. Chen, we have another success to report, announced Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been promoted to head of the station's nanobotic research division. The Rigelian colony ship that was infected with the crystalline parasites has been completely cleared. The adapted treatment worked perfectly. Sarah nodded with satisfaction but without surprise. This was the 15th successful deployment of adaptive medical techniques in the past 4 months. Each case had been different. Parasites that turned victims into living crystals, organisms that consumed memories, biological weapons that targeted specific genetic markers, but the fundamental approach remained the same. Instead of relying on established protocols, the medical teams analyzed each threat individually and developed creative solutions that the hostile organisms couldn't predict or adapt to. Any complications with the treatment? Sarah asked, reviewing the preliminary reports on her tablet. Actually, quite the opposite, Marcus replied with a grin. The Rigelians' neural pathways have been enhanced by the nanobotic therapy. They're reporting improved memory retention and faster cognitive processing. It seems our treatments don't just cure, they improve upon the original biological systems. This had become a common theme. The adaptive medical approach didn't just heal damage. It made patients stronger and more resilient than they had been before infection. Immune systems were enhanced, neural pathways were optimized, and in some cases entirely new biological capabilities emerged. Sarah made her way to the station's most popular section, the Feline research wing. What had started as a joke about Whiskers' crucial role in developing the original treatment had evolved into serious scientific study of Earth cats' unique biological properties. The wing housed 17 cats of various breeds, all volunteers from Earth who seemed to enjoy their role as medical consultants. Whiskers herself had become something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy. The small orange cat had her own quarters, complete with specialized equipment for monitoring her enhanced immune system. More importantly, she had become the template for developing treatments that could be adapted to virtually any biological threat. "Good morning, Whiskers," Sarah said, entering the cat's quarters. Whiskers looked up from where she was lounging in a patch of artificial sunlight, stretched languidly, and then jumped down to rub against Sarah's legs with obvious affection. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now the station's director of bioenhancement research, looked up from her workstation. "Sarah, you need to see this. Whiskers' latest blood work shows something extraordinary." The analysis revealed that Whiskers' immune system had continued to evolve over the past 6 months. The nanobotic modifications hadn't just created a static improvement. They had given her immune system the ability to continuously adapt and improve itself. Her body was essentially learning to defend against threats that didn't even exist yet. "She's become a living medical laboratory," Yuki explained. "Her immune system is actively studying and cataloging every biological signature it encounters, building a comprehensive database of potential threats and countermeasures. This discovery had profound implications. If they could understand and replicate Whiskers' enhanced adaptive immunity, they could potentially create treatments that would protect against biological weapons that hadn't even been invented yet." A chime from the station's communication system interrupted their research. "Dr. Chen, please report to the command center immediately. We have an emergency situation developing." Sarah hurried to the command center, where she found Captain Morrison and Dr. Kalava studying urgent reports from across the galaxy. The news was troubling. Several outer rim colonies had gone completely silent, with their last transmissions indicating some kind of biological catastrophe. "It's not parasites this time," Dr. Kalava explained, her expression grave. "The preliminary report suggests something much more sophisticated. Entire populations are being converted into something else, not killed, but transformed into beings that barely retain their original species characteristics." Captain Morrison activated the holographic display, showing the affected star systems. "Whatever this is, it's spreading fast. 3 colonies have gone dark in the past week, and we're getting reports of strange biological signals from a dozen more systems." Sarah studied the data, recognizing patterns that reminded her of the original parasitic threat, but with significant differences. This wasn't random infection, it was coordinated transformation on a massive scale. "Have we identified the source?" she asked. "That's the most disturbing part," Captain Morrison replied. "Intelligence suggests this might be connected to whoever originally created the parasites we encountered on the Selthura's Pride. It appears they've learned from our success and developed something specifically designed to counter adaptive medical treatments." The implications were staggering. If the creators of the original biological weapons had studied the human medical approach and developed countermeasures, the galaxy was facing a threat that could render their new adaptive techniques useless. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Kalava said quietly, "they're specifically requesting you to lead the response team. Your reputation for solving impossible medical puzzles has spread throughout the galaxy. If anyone can find a way to stop this new threat, it's you." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders once again. But as she looked around at the diverse team of medical professionals who had assembled on the research station, she realized she wasn't facing this challenge alone. The past 6 months had created something unprecedented, a truly collaborative medical community that combined the best of every species' knowledge and capabilities. "Prepare the sanctuary for immediate departure," she decided. "And Dr. Kalava, I want you to lead a parallel research effort here on the station. If we're dealing with an enemy that's adapted to counter our methods, we need to be prepared to adapt even faster." As the station prepared for what might be the greatest medical crisis in galactic history, Sarah returned to Whiskers' quarters. The small cat seemed to sense the urgency of the situation, looking up at Sarah with bright, intelligent eyes. "Ready for another adventure, partner?" Sarah asked, gently stroking Whiskers' orange fur. Whiskers purred and rubbed against Sarah's hand, as if to say she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had already changed the course of galactic medicine once. Now they would have to do it again, facing an enemy that had learned from their previous victories and developed countermeasures specifically designed to defeat them. But Sarah had learned something important over the past 6 months. The true strength of adaptive medicine wasn't in any single technique or treatment. It was in the willingness to constantly evolve, to think creatively, and to never give up when lives were at stake. As long as they maintained that spirit, no biological threat could permanently defeat them. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of brilliant minds working together to protect life in all its forms. And sometimes the smallest and most unexpected allies, like one orange cat from Earth, could make all the difference in the galaxy.